Counsel?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Abdool, you described for the prosecutor what you say you observed of Mr. Jackson's behavior with Jordan Chandler, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you saw what you've described, you did not automatically call any police officer, correct?
That's correct.
And you were a former police officer yourself, correct?
Yes, sir.
You had been a police officer in, was it Trinidad?
Yes, sir.
How long were you a police officer in Trinidad?
3-4 years or so.
Okay, and you were trained to use firearms, etc., correct?
Yes, sir.
And at one point you carried a concealed weapon, right?
Yes, sir.
Were you carrying a concealed weapon during the time you worked at Neverland?
No, sir.
Approximately when do you recall seeing Mr. Jackson with Jordan Chandler? Can you tell me approximately when you say you saw this?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as to which occasion. Vague.
Sustained.
Let's take the first occasion you described. Okay. Dealing with the jacuzzi, all right?
Uh-huh.
Approximately when do you think you saw that?
I can't give an exact date, but I recollect when he came back from overseas. So it would have been probably around the middle of 93 or so.
Okay.
I'm just guessing.
And you described another incident.
Yes.
The prosecutor asked you about the Peter Pan statue, right?
Yes.
And approximately when do you think that happened?
I don't recall, but it would be in that time frame, maybe after. I don't recall.
Okay, this is sometime in 93, do you think?
92, 93, yes. It's difficult for me to give you a date.
Now, are you familiar with an event at Neverland called Family Day?
Yes.
And what is Family Day at Neverland?
Family Day is when the employees are invited to bring their family.
And you participated in Family Day with your family, correct?
Yes. On maybe 2-3 occasions, yeah.
You participated on Family Day at Neverland with your family in 1994, didn't you?
I think it was Appreciation Day. Employee Appreciation Day it was called.
Okay, and you brought your family to Neverland in 1994 to participate in that, correct?
Yes, sir.
This was after the events you claim you saw that you have just described?
Yes, sir.
Do you know someone named Sandy Doms?
Yes, sir.
Who is Sandy Doms?
Sandy Doms used to work at the ranch administration office.
And did you work with her?
I worked on the ranch, but not with her.
Was she working at the ranch while you were working at the ranch?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you and Sandy Doms met with a TV show called Inside Edition, did you not?
It's possible, yeah.
Do you remember doing that?
I know we gave interviews. Maybe television, yes. It's been about 13 years.
I'm sorry?
It's difficult to remember.
She was the spokesperson for a group, that included you, that gave various interviews, right?
I don't recall, but that's probably correct, yeah. I'm not going to deny that.
And one of them was with the TV show Inside Edition, right?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the question. It calls for lack of foundation that he was involved.
Your Honor, he said he was involved.
Well.
Overruled. You may answer. Do you want the last question read back?
Yes, please.
And one of them was with the TV show Inside Edition, right?
What I'm saying is, if that's a fact, yes, I don't deny it. But I don't recall specifically Inside Edition or who. But I'm saying.
You recall various TV shows, correct?
TV shows or TV show, or newspapers or newspaper, I don't, yes. But I gave interviews or interview, yeah.
And you and Sandy Doms split some of that money, right?
What's the word? Sweat.
You and Sandy Doms split some of the money that you got from television, did you not?
No, sir.
Did it all go to the attorney fund?
As far as I know.
But Sandy Doms was not, excuse me. Did Sandy Doms arrange these meetings or did they all go through Gary, to your knowledge?
I don't recall.
Okay, alright. Do you remember meeting for several days with a book author named Gutierrez?
I met once with him. Not several, just once.
It was a long meeting, was it not?
Probably, yeah, 2-3 hours.
Now, These meetings with various representatives of the media, were they going on during the lawsuit?
I don't recall the specific one, but I gave interviews during the lawsuit, yes. I don't deny that.
While you were doing this in 1994, you knew that security guards at the Jackson family home in Encino had gotten $100,000 for selling stories, correct?
No, I don't recall that.
You never discussed that with your cohorts?
No, I may have. I don't recall. I don't recall that one, no.
Okay, you've indicated you never spoke a word with Jordan Chandler, right?
Yeah, I mean, I may have said, he asked for something, but conversation-wise, I don't recall having any conversation with him.
Did you ever see his mother at Neverland?
Yes.
Did you see her on a number of occasions?
Yes, she's been there on a few occasions, yes.
You said you worked with Ralph Chacon, correct?
Yes.
And how long did you work with Ralph Chacon?
I worked most of my time at the ranch on the graveyard shift. Ralph Chacon may have worked a substantial time, too, graveyard shift. But he was on another shift, also.
Was he a friend of yours?
Yeah, we got along pretty good. I would say a friend, yeah.
You mentioned someone named Brett Barnes, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you ever see relatives of Brett Barnes at Neverland?
I don't recall, maybe.
Do you recall his mother?
Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't recall.
Do you recall ever seeing his sister?
No, I don't recall.
Okay.
I may have.
Now, you indicated that you didn't know if there were any rules should a child get out of line, or wild, or anything like that. You said there were no rules that you were supposed to follow?
I recall there were no procedure if a child. I don't recall anything like that.
Well.
Of course, if they're doing something really bad, you have to stop that, but.
Well, you said Jordan Chandler crashed a golf cart at one point, right?
Yeah, I remember he hit the golf cart at one.
Did you take care of him?
I think there was an accident report written. That's what vaguely.
Well, what did you consider your responsibilities as head of security to be?
To provide security for Mr. Jackson and his guests, the property and so on. Make sure that intruders don't come on the property. That type of thing.
Now, the prosecutor asked you if you had been head of security, right?
Yes, sir.
And you answered yes, right?
Yes. For the last part of my employment, yes.
And how long a part of your employment were you head of security?
Maybe 3 months. 3 months, 4 months.
3 months?
Yeah.
So that would be the last 3 months that you worked in 1994, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you became head of security long after you claim you saw Mr. Jackson act this way with Mr. Chandler, correct?
That's correct.
And before you were head of security, what was your position?
I was a sergeant, supervisor of a shift.
Now, you said that the jacuzzi is located outside the house, right?
The one I'm talking about. Maybe there's one inside, I don't know.
But there's one outside the house?
Yes, sir.
Is that in the back of the house?
It's in the back of the house.
Okay, and what else do you see near the jacuzzi in the back of the house?
There's the jacuzzi. There is a large swimming pool. On the other side, there is a huge barbecue area with a roof, but it's not, boarded, no sides.
That jacuzzi is in open view, right? It's not hidden by anything?
There's some little shrubs in that area. But it's not hidden, no.
Yeah, it's a pretty open area, isn't it?
Pretty much, yes.
And guards who are walking around Neverland or driving can see it, correct?
No, if you're driving, you probably cannot see it.
But if you're walking around, you can?
Well, how can I answer you? We were told not to go near Mr. Jackson and his guests, so we would not walk where he was.
There are hills above, correct?
Yes.
You could actually look down, can't you?
If you look down with binoculars or so, you could probably see.
And there are offices on the hill, true?
Not in that area, no.
Which area are you talking about when you say, a hill?
You said jacuzzi?
Yes.
In relation to the jacuzzi, if you go way down, maybe 200-300 yards, in that area, there is the administration office, the gardeners.
Right.
But they cannot see the jacuzzi area.
They can see the pool area, can't they?
No.
Can't see it at all, even if they look?
Even if they look. Because the arcade and the trees in that area are going to be blocking that area.
The pool area is a pretty wide open area, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's a big building blocking it. You can't see through.
But guards do walk around, do they not?
Yes, but not when we have guests and stuff. They don't want us walking around when they're swimming.
Okay, but you stay there when guests are there because you're supposed to protect the guests, true?
Generally, if guests are around there, you don't stay close where, to watch them. You would stay maybe like in the breezeway or in a dark area. But you don't go close to the guests.
But part of your responsibility was to make sure that guests are properly treated, true?
Yes, but we were instructed not to have close contact with Mr. Jackson or his guests, to keep away, give them distance.
Well, to observe what you say you observed, you would have had to get close to Mr. Jackson, true?
Are you talking about the Peter Pan display?
Talking about the jacuzzi.
Yeah, well, he called me for a couple of drinks, for a couple of sodas.
Right.
I was walking and he says, "Security, security." So I went to him, and he said, "Can you bring 2 sodas?" And I spoke to the chef about it.
Obviously, Mr. Jackson didn't seem to be afraid to have you see what he was doing.
I did not go near him. I was a distance when he asked me for the sodas.
He called you, right?
He called me, that's correct.
Okay, now, typically how many hours would you work on a shift?
Pardon me.
How many hours would you work on a shift?
Areas?
No, hours, time.
Hours. 8 hours. Maybe a little bit more if it's needed, if we're short.
And at the time that you say Mr. Jackson locked his house, what shift were you working?
The night shift, the graveyard shift. I think it was from like 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning.
10 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning?
Yes.
Now, how often did you work that graveyard shift?
I worked that graveyard shift, I'm just estimating, pretty much all my employment. I would say 75–80% of my employment.
And do you recall ever seeing Mr. Jackson outside in the evening?
Yes, sir.
Did you ever see Mr. Jackson walking late at night?
Yes, sir.
Ever see Mr. Jackson driving late at night?
Yes, sir.
And you would sometimes see Mr. Jackson at 3 o'clock in the morning, correct?
Yes, sir.
Because Mr. Jackson's known to be by himself sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning, right?
I don't recall seeing him by himself 3 o'clock in the morning.
He would take walks or he would drive, correct?
I don't recall him by himself at 3 o'clock in the morning.
But you've seen him late at night on his property, true?
Not alone, but with guests.
Have you seen him late at night on his property?
That's correct.
Have you ever seen him driving on his property alone late at night?
No, I don't recall. But I really don't recall Mr. Jackson driving alone.
And you've seen him with guests late at night, right?
Yes, sir.
3 o'clock in the morning was not unusual at times, right?
I would say not unusual. That would be unusual. Hardly ever. Maybe all my employment I've seen him outside that time maybe 2 or 3 times or so.
And, sir, he has gone back into his house late at night and locked it, hasn't he?
That evening, that night? Before?
He has done that at various times when he goes out late at night, hasn't he?
I don't recall that, sir.
Okay.
He may have, but I don't recall.
But you didn't check every time he went out late at night to see if he locked the door when he went back into the house?
Yes, you have to check. You have to check the whole property to make sure the property is secured.
But he routinely locks that door when he comes back in the wee hours of the morning, sir?
No, sir, I'm telling you.
Okay.
I know that is a fact.
So when he brings guests back into his house at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, he never locks it, is what you're saying?
Mr. Jackson doesn't lock the property, even his house. We walk around and lock the house.
Sir, you didn't check every time he went back into his house late at night to see if it was locked?
I'm going to object as argumentative and asked and answered.
All right.
Sustained.
Now, where is the Peter Pan display in relation to the house?
If you have the house, the main house.
Yes.
There's a breezeway. Unlike a big archway, there's Mr. Jackson's office. So the Peter Pan display would be if you're driving to the back of the house, and you come around to the side of Mr. Jackson's office.
Aha.
The Peter Pan display, as far as I can recall, would be on that window. So it would be to the back of the house. Would be 10, 15 yards or so.
Okay, now, you indicated you had requested a raise several months before you got one, right?
That's what I recollect, yeah.
And you had requested a raise to a Mr. Bray, correct?
I remember requesting a raise to the administration. I'm not sure if it's directly to Mr. Bray, but to the head of Mr. Jackson's company. I knew he had put Mr. Bray in there.
I'm sorry. You had complained that you were very underpaid, true?
Well, I said I should be paid the amount that the last chief of security was being paid. That's what I recollect.
Right. And didn't you also complain that others were getting paid more than they should, like the private security guards?
I don't recollect that. I recall telling them that some officers were working for more money than some, and they should come up to be equal. So the new officers were making more money than the old officers we hired on. I think it's fair that they should get the same amount of money.
Did you put the request in writing?
I recall so, yes. I vaguely recall that.
And were you interviewed about that request?
By Mr. Bray, yes.
Okay, now, people in your security group did not like Mr. Jackson's private security people, did they?
I can't speak for everybody. But in the beginning, I got along with them in the beginning.
But didn't a lot of tension develop between the two groups?
Yeah, it developed as time went on, yes.
And your group would not travel with Mr. Jackson, right?
No, we were just security for the ranch.
The other group would travel with him when he went on tour, right?
That's correct. That's my understanding.
They would travel with him to various cities, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And when they returned, when Mr. Jackson returned, they would come with him, right?
No, that's the first time they came on property.
Well, sometimes one or two would travel on a flight with him, correct?
I don't know. I've never been on a flight with him. But I'm talking about Neverland Valley Ranch.
Right.
When Mr. Jackson came back in 93 or 94, that's the first time I've seen any one of his OS officers there.
But he had security people in the past when he went on tours, throughout his life, providing security for him.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, and he's had security problems his whole career because he's so famous, right?
Yes, I know that.
Now, you said Van Norman pointed a gun at a fan, is that true?
Yes.
Did you watch that?
Yes. He, put through the gate.
And you were upset with that?
I was frightened,
And never made a complaint to anybody?
No, who can you complain to?
Well, you're a former police officer. You could call the local police, couldn't you?
Yes, I could have. But in the conditions there, you can't talk. When you're in that ring of that employment, you don't talk.
Where were you living at that time?
Lompoc.
On one of your trips back or forth to Lompoc, you could have called a police officer, correct?
That's correct.
Now, do you remember in your civil trial a tape was produced that you claim had some threats on it?
I vaguely remember. I remember there was a tape, yes.
And it turned out to be a tape involving your son and some music. Do you remember that?
Could be, yeah.
There was no threat at all, correct?
Probably, yeah. I don't recall, but it's fine.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Abdool, with regard to those occasions where you saw Mr. Jackson out at night at 3 a.m., was he with little boys on any of those occasions?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mesereau asked you why you didn't complain to Mr. Jackson about certain events that were happening on the ranch with regard to these OS individuals. Do you recall those series of questions?
Yes, sir.
Why did you not complain to Mr. Jackson about that?
I felt they were more like attached to him, because he'd be talking with them and they would go meet him personally and talk to him. So I was scared to, go to him and complain about the people who were close to him.
Now, Mr. Mesereau asked you about this gasoline incident.
Yeah.
And do you remember he showed you the form? It was December of 93?
Yeah, okay.
And was it after that point, after this incident where you wouldn't sign for having done anything wrong, that you became, they promoted you to head of security?
Yes, sir. May I explain about the gasoline?
Pardon?
May I explain about the gasoline?
If you'd like to.
Yeah, what happened? I remember going to work that evening, and I had very little gas in my car. And I ran an errand, to somewhere in Solvang with my personal car. And when I came back, I put 3 gallons of gasoline to, for whatever I used, because I had very little gas to go home after. And I told Mr. Wegner about it. I told him about it. I told him I took 3 gallons of gas. I didn't hide it. And, we had, in the ending, our relationship was not good.
But in any case, after that incident they still promoted you?
To head of security, yes.
Okay. Now, with regard to some timing issues here, were you still employed at the ranch at the time that you testified before the Los Angeles County Grand Jury?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mesereau asked you a lot of questions about interviews that you gave and your participation in a joint interview with a magazine.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever say anything during those interviews that you said that was untrue?
I don't recall the interviews. It's hard, it's 13 years ago. It's hard for me to recall what I said or what I was quoted as saying.
Well, I'm not interested in what you were quoted, because we all know how we can be misquoted. But with regard to what you have said, would you have said anything that was untrue?
No.
Objection. Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Do you have a recollection of ever saying anything to any of those people, interviews, that was untrue?
No.
Objection.
I.
Objection. Relevance. Foundation. Calls for speculation.
Overruled. You may answer.
That means you can answer.
Can you say the question again?
He said, no, so.
So just leave the answer in, Your Honor? That's fine. And lastly, since this case has been in the news, okay, the present case.
The 9.
This case.
Okay.
The current case against Mr. Jackson.
Yes, sir.
And before you were subpoenaed to testify in this case, were you approached by members of the press to give interviews?
Within the last year and a half, yes.
And were you offered substantial amounts of money to do that?
Objection. Leading. Foundation.
Overruled. You may answer.
People have not talked money figure. They have come to my house. They have called me at work. They want to do interviews. They want to write books. Many reporters in the last year and a half have approached me.
Have you talked to any of them?
I pretty much chase them away. I tell them, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to get involved in this.
And you're here today because you were subpoenaed to come, correct?
Yes, sir.
Nothing further.
Mr. Abdool, you're subject to a gag order in this case, correct?
That's correct.
You're not allowed to talk to the media, right?
That's correct.
You were informed of the gag order by the prosecution, correct?
Yeah, about 2-3 months ago, yes.
Well.
I'm talking about before that.
Well, even before that, you knew that you were a potential witness in the case, didn't you?
Yes.
When did you first talk to any prosecutor about your testifying in the case?
Mr. Sneddon called me about 3 weeks ago, I think.
Did you ever talk to any sheriff about this case?
No.
Never gave interviews at all?
Yes, I talked to sheriffs long ago. 12-13 years ago, I think.
Okay.
But recently, no. Mr. Sneddon called me about 3 weeks ago. That's the first contact I had with the sheriffs.
Did he tell you there was a gag order on the case?
The officer that served me.
Yes.
The subpoena at my house told me there was a gag order.
Okay. No further questions.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may step down.
We'll call as our next witness, Your Honor, Lieutenant Jeff Klapakis.
When you get to the witness stand, you may be seated. You're still under oath.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant Klapakis.
Good afternoon.
You've previously testified that you were assigned to the case of People vs. Michael Jackson as the lead investigator?
I was the lieutenant in charge of the case, yes.
All right, and I think where I left off questioning you, I asked you if, in the month of January 2004, you served a search warrant on the home of Frederick Mark Schaffel?
Yes, I did.
And what day was that?
I believe it was January 31st, '04.
Who was with you when you served that warrant?
I had several of my detectives, John McCammon, Craig Bonner, Vic Alvarez, Sergeant Roble. They arrived at differing times. I believe Sergeant Roble was doing something else and he arrived shortly thereafter. Paul Zealous.
And were you directed by the court to seize certain documents pursuant to that search warrant?
Yes.
I'm going to object to the court directing him. He was permitted by the court to do that.
It was an order is what it is.
Well, you're both right. Next question.
All right, thank you. If I may approach, Your Honor.
Yes.
Lieutenant Klapakis, I show you a notebook that is marked as Original Exhibits 400 to 420, F. Mark Schaffel files. Under the tab 400, there appears to be a single page that says, entitled, Work Agreement with Neverland Valley Entertainment. Can you identify that document for me, please?
Yes, this is a document we found pursuant to that search warrant at Schaffel's house, and it's a work agreement between Michael Jackson.
Objection, Your Honor. That's non-responsive. Motion to strike.
Stricken.
And this document is noted as Exhibit 400 on the first page, is that correct?
Yes.
Where was this document seized from?
It was found in a master bedroom closet in Mr. Schaffel's house.
Okay. Was there any box or file cabinet, anything of that nature that you located that file in?
No, I believe it was loose in the closet.
And now I show you Exhibit 401. It appears to be a 4-page document. Has Exhibit tab 401 on the front page, and there appears to be a fax sheet on the front of that to Tom Byrne.
Yes.
Can you identify that document for me, please?
Yes. This is a document I found in a locked closet within a guest bedroom of Mr. Schaffel's house. And it was in a filing cabinet.
Okay. Was there anybody living in that guest bedroom?
No.
Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Move to strike the answer.
Stricken.
All right. Did you see anybody else's personal belongings in that room?
No.
And you said that the closet was locked. Tell me about that.
It was. I believe it was a deadbolt lock on a closet in that bedroom.
How did you get into the closet?
One of my detectives is familiar with how to pick locks, and he picked the lock.
And tell me about the filing cabinet that it was seized from.
There were, I believe, 7 filing cabinets in this closet. And I believe it was in the 6th filing cabinet, one of the drawers.
And can you identify for me the nature of documents that were found in those filing cabinets along with this document?
Yes.
I'm going to object. Calls for hearsay.
I'm asking for a generality.
Then it's vague.
Sustained.
Were you able to determine the identity of the individual whose documents were in those cabinets based upon the totality of everything that you searched? And maybe I'll back away from that and ask, first of all, did you have occasion to peruse the contents of those various file cabinets?
Yes.
And was there any indicia of ownership located in those file cabinets?
Objection. Calls for speculation.
Calls for a conclusion. Sustained.
Was there anybody's name associated with the documents in those file cabinets?
Yes.
Objection. Vague. Calls for speculation. Lack of foundation.
Sustained.
Did you have any indication that those file cabinets belonged to anybody other than the owner of that home?
Objection. Your Honor. This calls for speculation. There's a lack of foundation proven. It's an opinion or conclusion.
Well, I'll sustain the objection.
All right. Did you know if, could you tell, based upon your, well, let me strike that. Did you do a walkthrough of that house?
Yes.
Did you locate any other occupants?
No.
Any occupants whatsoever?
The house was vacant. Not vacant, but nobody was there. Unoccupied. Excuse me.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
I'll let you take your stuff. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Okay. Now, first of all, you said something in response to a question about a search warrant. Your office applied for a search warrant, correct?
Several.
Okay. We're talking about this particular case.
Then yes.
And what date was the search warrant applied for?
I believe it was applied for on the same date.
What date was that?
I believe it was January 31st, 04.
And at that time, when you applied for the warrant, you understood you were asking the court's permission to search a private area, right?
A residential home.
Which would be a private, otherwise a private area, correct?
Yes.
Alright, and that is not, you were not, let me withdraw that. It was not your understanding that any court, on its own volition, told you ought to go search this area, is that right?
Objection. Calls for a legal conclusion.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
I'm not quite sure. Could you repeat the question?
Okay, could we ask it be read back?
All right.
All right, and that is not, you were not, let me withdraw that. It was not your understanding that any court, on its own volition, told you ought to go search this area, is that right?
If I understand your question correctly, did the court ask us to go do this? The answer is no.
Alright, as part of law enforcement, you decide where you want to go, you ask permission, and you either get it or you don't when you ask for a warrant, correct?
Yes. That's an easy way to say it, sure.
Alright, now, when you searched these premises, approximately how many documents were ultimately booked into evidence?
Do you want a guesstimate?
Your best estimate, yes.
Hundreds.
Thousands?
It's very possible there were thousands.
Now, you're the lieutenant in charge of this investigation, correct?
Yes.
And therefore, part of your responsibility is to know what is booked into evidence, correct?
That's pretty vague. I mean, I'm not going to know everything that, on every document that goes in, no. The answer would be no.
But you have a general idea of how many documents were seized in January, correct?
Generally? And I said hundreds, possibly 1,000.
100, possibly 1,000?
Yes.
Were any other documents seized from Mr. Schaffel on any other occasions?
Yes.
And how many documents were seized?
No, actually I'm not sure we seized documents, but we seized computers on a different occasion.
Alright, and when was that?
I believe it was a few days afterwards. But again, I'm not sure. I wasn't present during that search.
And your understanding, as the lieutenant in charge of this investigation, that the computers contained tens of thousands of documents?
Objection. Beyond the scope and relevance.
Sustained.
Okay, now, based on your role as the lieutenant in charge of this investigation, were you aware from your investigation that Mr. Schaffel had employed other people?
I'm aware that he worked with other people, yes. Whether they were employed by him, that.
Were you aware from your investigation that other people had been given office space within Mr. Schaffel's house?
Objection. Foundation. Hearsay.
Overruled. You may answer.
I'm aware that Mr. Schaffel also used his home as an office at times.
And he had other people working for him there in his house?
I believe that they did work out of his home at times, yes.
There you go. Thank you. No further questions.
I have no further questions.
You may step down.
Thank you.
Call Detective Craig Bonner as our next witness.
When you get to the witness stand, you may be seated. You're still under oath.
Good afternoon, Detective Bonner.
Good afternoon.
Before I begin asking you about some files regarding a search warrant, I'm going to cover a couple of other items. Pursuant to you previously testified you're a detective in the People v. Jackson case, correct?
That's correct.
And pursuant to your investigation, were you asked to compare a sheriff's office item number, a tape, item number 817, with a court exhibit number 827? This would be a phone call that has been admitted into evidence referred to as the Frank Janet phone call.
That's correct.
Did you compare those items as to their similarity or identical? The identical information on those two, I shouldn't say documents. I believe they're two tapes, right? Or CDs?
That's correct. Well, the original is a tape. The exhibit is a CD.
Okay, so the SO number 817 is a tape that was seized pursuant to this case?
That's correct.
And you compared that with the court CD, item number 827?
That's correct.
Are they one and the same, as far as the voices and information that's on those two audio medias?
Yes, they are.
Same question for Sheriff's Office item number 818, and Court Exhibit number 828, which is the Miller interview of the Arvizo family. Did you compare those two items?
Yes, I did.
Again, was 818 a tape?
Yes, it was.
828 as a CD?
Yes.
And they're one and the same in terms of the information that's on them?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Off-the-record discussion held at counsel table.
Could we have just a moment, Your Honor, please?
I need an exhibit number. Detective, pursuant to your duties in this case, were you asked to do a photographic documentation of grand jury exhibits?
Yes, I was.
And what was the nature of that task?
On July 20th, I went to the Superior Court in Santa Barbara where the exhibits that were lodged into the court from the grand jury proceedings were being held. I then photographed certain exhibits at that location, including every page of magazines that were booked in.
Okay. And if I might approach again, Your Honor.
Yes.
Detective, I show you an envelope with Exhibit 53, GJ Pics, written on the outside. It appears to contain a document with item 317 on the top. It is held together by a green paperclip and there's 3 pages to it. And then there appear to be a number of photographs that are following that, along with photographs of the contents of Exhibit 470 face page. Can you identify that for me?
Yes, I can.
What is it?
Well, there's one problem. I think I missed the court exhibit number for what is being shown the witness.
Exhibit 843. Alright, can you please identify that for me, Detective?
Yes, I can. When I went to the court, specifically one of the items that I photographed the contents of was item 317, the black briefcase. That's also the grand jury exhibit number 53. I did that with a digital camera. All of those photographs were downloaded onto a CD. These pictures are the printed photographs that I took of the materials. This document corresponds to these pictures and tells the reader which picture corresponds to which item, and to what the current exhibit number is for this trial. In addition to that, I also went in and I handwrote in the Sheriff's Department item number for each picture.
Okay. Ask to admit exhibit number 843 at this time, Your Honor.
I'm going to object to it. Number 1, it contains some extraneous material, other than the photographs of the grand jury exhibits. Number 2, that it's cumulative. These pages of these magazines have already been marked and shown to the jury countless times in different contexts or for different reasons. This being yet another set, it's cumulative.
And I'm willing to make an offer as to the specific reason for this, if you wish.
Okay.
Shall we do it at sidebar?
All right. Discussion held off the record at sidebar. All right. Based on the offer of proof, I'll admit it.
All right. If I could have the Elmo, please. All right. So what was the date that you conducted this photo essay of evidence?
Asked and answered, and photo essay is vague and ambiguous.
Sustained.
When did you do these photographs?
July 20th.
All right. All of them were taken on that day?
Yes.
And I show you the first page of the 3-page document that I previously identified. And if you tell me what explain this document to me, please.
I prepared this by order sequence of the pictures. It will tell you the evidence item number, that's the Sheriff's Department number, as well as the trial exhibit number for the item that is pictured.
Okay.
That's by sequence of the pictures.
All right. And there's 3 pages of that, correct?
Correct.
2.5? Well, almost 3.
They're the same material. They're in different order for researching purposes.
All right. I need you to explain that for me. I'll show you the first one again.
Actually, Your Honor, I apologize. I should have brought this up, but we have not been provided a copy of this, of any of this, but specifically these 3 pages. And it appears that counsel's not familiar with them either. Could we please have a copy so we can look at them closely while we go through here?
Do you have a copy for them?
No.
I have an extra copy.
Thank you, Detective.
Go ahead.
May I proceed? Okay. Now, this one has the notation in the right-hand portion of the document, order by picture sequence.
That's correct. So.
And what does that mean?
It means that if you follow along with the pictures, This document is going to follow as the pictures go along.
Do you mean in terms of the?
So if you start, page 1, with the first picture, it's a picture of item 317J.
Okay. And did you make that notation on each of the pictures that is in this exhibit?
Yes, I did.
Okay. The second page, that's order by SBSO item number. What does that mean?
It's the same data that has been reconfigured so that if somebody wants to go and quickly look based upon the Sheriff's Department item number, that they can do that, and they can correspond that with the trial exhibit number.
Okay. And then lastly, you have order by criminal trial exhibit number.
Again, the same data. This time it had been arranged so that you can quickly look, based upon a trial exhibit number, and know what the Sheriff's Department number is.
Okay. So all of these three documents have the same information in different configurations?
That's correct.
Alright. Now, I'm just going to show you the first page of this group of exhibits and just ask you to explain to me what you did. Okay. These are an example of the photographs you took?
Yes, they are.
And explain this exhibit to me.
The easiest way, it's a printout in order of the pictures as they were taken. You can't really see it too well, it's a little fuzzy, but 317J is written above this picture.
We're going to give you a laser pointer so it's a little easier for you, and I'll blow this up a little bit.
Okay, this is item 317J. I have notated that above the picture. Same thing for this one. If you were to, I'll skip down to this picture right here. This is 317A, and the order goes like this.
And these are, this is the, I believe you testified to this, but this is the grand jury exhibit that was presented to the grand jury?
That's correct.
Alright, detective, did you participate in the execution of a search warrant in the case of People v. Jackson on January 31, 2004?
Yes, I did.
And whose home did you serve that search warrant on?
Mark Schaffel or Frederick Schaffel.
And did you seize documents pursuant to that search warrant?
Yes, I did.
If I might approach again, Your Honor.
Yes.
Alright, detective, I show you the notebook that I've mentioned as Exhibit 400 through 420. And showing you Exhibit 402, which appears to be a Neverland Valley Entertainment. What more can I give, is at the top of it. I'm sorry. I'm a little ahead of myself here. I'm going to first show you Exhibit 404, which appears to be a 2-page document, 3-page document. The first page appears to be entitled, Messages. Did you seize that document pursuant to the warrant?
Yes, I did.
Then there are 2 more pages attached to that or behind that, the first of which is entitled, MJJ Productions Working Group List. Appear to be phone numbers. Did you also seize those documents, those 2 documents?
Yes, I did.
Where did you seize those?
Those were seized from an upstairs bedroom closet. It was a small walk-in closet that was locked, and within that were a number of filing cabinets. One of these cabinets in particular had a drawer that was pretty much filled with materials related to this case. We seized, or I seized that entire drawer, and that is where this document came from.
Did it come out of a specific file?
I believe it came out of the Stuart Backerman file.
A file that had Stuart.
I'm going to object to hearsay content. There's no foundation for any of this.
I'm just asking where it was located.
The objection is overruled.
Moving to 405. Let's see, it appears to be a 1-page document with Bell Yard at the top of it. Did you seize that pursuant to the execution of this warrant?
Yes, I did.
And where was that document seized?
This came out of the same file drawer.
Moving on to 406, it appears to be a 14-page document. The first document has Hale Lane at the top of it. Appears to be a fax sheet. Did you seize these 14 pages?
Yes, I did.
And where did they come from?
Again, out of the same file drawer.
407, it appears to be a 10-page document, and the first page appears to be an email entitled, Spain Deal. Can you look through those documents and tell me if you seized those pursuant to the search warrant that you've been discussing in this?
Yes, I did.
And where were those documents seized from?
Those were on top of the filing cabinets.
Okay. Were they located inside any particular file?
There was a file titled, Ronald.
408 appears to be 4 pages, and I think we've withdrawn that, so I'll move on. 409, that's my next witness. 410. Did you seize that document? This appears to be a 4-page document. Starts off with a phone number sheet, 2 pages of yellow paper, lined paper, and then looks like a fax.
Yes, I did.
Were those seized pursuant to the warrant?
Yes, they were.
And where were they seized from?
They were seized from, again, on top of the filing cabinets, and they were in a file-held address book.
Moving on to 411. This is a 2-page document. Appears to be some kind of a computer printout with Enterprise Rent-A-Car on the top page of each one. Did you seize those documents?
Yes, I did.
Where did they come from?
They came from that large filing drawer that we seized, and specifically a file in that drawer that said, Enterprise Rental.
From the locked closet?
Yes.
And the file said, Enterprise Rental.
Yes.
Moving on to 412. It appears to be a 5-page document. A Hale Lane fax sheet on the first one. Gabriel Media on the second one. Appearance and Consent, third. MJJ Productions on the fourth. The fifth appears to be a signature page.
They can't hear you, sir.
The fifth appears to be a signature page.
I seized these documents.
Where did you seize them from?
These were seized from within that same file drawer. Specifically a file titled, Artist Release, or Artist Releases.
Okay. Moving on to 413, it appears to be a 10-page document. The first page. The first 5 pages appear to say, Appearance, Consent and Release, on them. The next page is a yellow lined page. And the next page appears to have 6 pages paper clipped together, all contained in one plastic liner, alright? So we've got, looks like, 11 pages total in there. Did you seize those documents?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Where did they come from?
They came from within that large filing drawer and in a file folder titled, Model Releases.
And showing you what's noted as page 7, there appears to be several documents that are paper clipped together. Were those documents paper clipped in that fashion when you found them?
I believe so, yes.
Alright. Moving on to 414, it appears to be an 8-page document that, and I believe we've withdrawn that. So I'll go to 415, which appears to be 47 pages of various records. The first one appears to be, has, Living with MJ, take 2 at the top. Did you seize those 47 pages, detective?
Yes, I did.
And where did those come from?
These were contained within a black binder which I found on a shelf above the filing cabinets.
Moving on to 417, skipping 416, it appears to be a 12-page document, at least 12 plastic-lined, or, I'll double-check this. It does appear to be 12 pages. Alright, can you identify that for me, please? Or I should say, did you seize those pages from the home of Mark Schaffel during the execution of this warrant?
Yes, I did.
Where did they come from?
They came from that same locked walk-in closet in a folder that was up above the filing cabinets.
And going now to, one question that I neglected to ask you. Did that come from a particular file?
I believe it was the David Gardner Legrand file.
Can we just specify for the record what that meant?
My question went to Exhibit 417. Its location was in the file drawer. My question was,
I understand. You pointed to a page, and I didn't know if you were singling out a page or you meant the whole exhibit.
No, I meant the whole exhibit.
I'm sorry to talk directly to counsel, but we worked it out.
Is that clear to you?
Yes.
That all those documents came from the David Gardner Legrand file?
Yes, it is.
Skipping 419 for the time being, going to 420, which appears to be a 28-page document, or 28 separate pages. Look to be various emails. Did you seize those documents pursuant to the warrant on Mr. Schaffel's home?
Yes, I did.
Where did they came from?
They came out of the same large filing drawer from the locked closet.
Moving on to 421, it appears to be a 10-page document. First page says at the top, Law Office, Law Offices of Armstrong, Hirsch, etc. It appears to be a fax sheet with an agreement attached to it. Did you seize those items, detective, pursuant to your warrant?
Yes, I did.
Where did they come from?
They came from on top of the filing cabinets.
That were in the locked closet?
Yes.
422. It appears to be a letter of intent from royalty advanced funding.
Still can't hear you, sir. You have to.
Okay. It appears to be a letter of intent from royalty advanced funding. Let's see. I'm going to have to count these pages. It appears to be 19 pages. Did you seize those documents pursuant to your search warrant?
Yes, I did.
And where were they seized from?
They were also on top of the file cabinets.
And same location, locked closet?
Yes.
Did they come out of any specific file?
I believe they came out of a file titled Royalty.
And lastly, 423, it appears to be 7 pages. The face page looks to be an email followed by various correspondence. Did you seize those documents?
Yes, I did.
Where did they come from?
They came out of the large filing drawer that we seized.
Okay. Once again, the locked file closet?
Yes.
And were they associated with any particular file?
I believe it was called Foreign Rights.
Alright. Thank you, Detective. No further questions.
May I have one moment, please, Your Honor? May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Let's talk about the grand jury pictures here, first of all. Are you aware that one of the fingerprints that was identified some time ago in this trial was located on a magazine that was in that briefcase?
I don't know. I've heard that. I don't know which one.
Okay, you've heard that?
Yes.
And so you did not go through to compare your numbers to see if the 317 Sheriff's Exhibit number matched up with the particular item on which a fingerprint was identified.
No.
Basically, what you're saying here with regard to all these grand jury pictures that we've just heard about is, you went to the grand jury clerk, right?
Correct.
And you had her pull out the briefcase, correct?
Yes.
And this was theoretically the way the briefcase was delivered to her by the grand jury when they were through. Is that right?
Theoretically, correct.
And so if she did her job, she would have kept it intact, and then it would be there, you would open it up, and the contents would be the way that she got it from the grand jury, correct?
Yes.
There was no way for you to know what was done with the briefcase at or during the grand jury proceedings. Is that correct?
No.
I'm sorry, I said, is that correct? So that's my fault. Was there any way for you to know what was done to the briefcase and the contents at or during the grand jury?
No, there's not.
Alright, and when you recovered the briefcase from the clerk, did you ascertain from her that she and staff members had gone through the exhibit without wearing gloves?
No.
Did you do anything to, from that moment forward, preserve the exhibit so that fingerprints could be analyzed?
Yes, I wore gloves.
And did you ask that the clerk wear gloves in the future when handling that exhibit?
I didn't know that she hadn't.
Okay, alright, very well. Let me ask you, Miss Frey, we're fine on that.
Okay.
Thank you for looking. Let me ask you about some of these exhibits that you had identified from the residence of Mr. Schaffel. And I want to ask you, first of all, if you were aware that persons other than Mr. Schaffel had been working out of his house.
Yes.
Now, you identified most of the exhibits in this book that's placed before you, is that correct?
Yes.
And by that I mean, just now you went through and you said, sure enough, I seized those items, correct?
Correct.
What percentage, if you can give us an estimate, of the materials that you seized does this book represent?
5 to 10%.
Okay, so there were thousands of pages.
Yes.
That you seized, correct?
Yes.
And you seized thousands of pages from tens of thousands of pages of documents and materials, maybe more than that, that were in these various offices or file cabinets or whatever the location was within this house, correct?
Correct.
Now, you indicated in your direct testimony, for instance, if you would look at Exhibit 421, please. It's in front of you there. 421 in the book. You indicated that this was a fax with a number of sheets attached to it. The first thing I want you to do is ask you to turn to page 2 of that exhibit, 421, and note that there's a handwritten number on the top.
8012?
Yes, sir. Is that a number that was there, or is that something that was placed there?
That number has been there. We didn't put that there.
Alright, so that's a number that just was on the document. You seized it. There it was.
Yes.
Alright, the district attorney asked you if the document was attached to the fax. Was the document, in fact, attached to the fax cover?
I don't know.
Okay. In fact, if you look at it, can you tell whether or not the document actually belongs to that fax?
Being that it didn't get, or it was not sent to me, I wouldn't absolutely know that. I know that I seized all of these documents from that file.
All right.
In his residence.
And I'm just trying to clarify the question about the document attached to the fax. It's attached as it's sitting there. You don't know whether or not it was physically stapled or attached at the time, correct?
No.
And if you look, there's no fax header on the first page and there are fax headers on the subsequent pages, correct?
Correct.
Now, I want to go back to an exhibit. Let me just find it here. 414. Let me see if I have the right one. Yes. 414. Now, the district attorney indicated, when you got to 414, he started to ask you about that and he said, we're withdrawing that exhibit, or, that's withdrawn, is that correct?
Yes.
I'd like to ask you about 414, and so I'm going to ask that it be marked for identification as 414. In other words, it's already been pre-marked by the prosecution, but I think I need to say on the record that we're asking this be identified on the record, if that's acceptable to the court. And it starts out with what appears to be a Xerox of, at least the one I have is a Xerox of 2.
I'm going to object to the admission of any evidence on that document on the basis of hearsay, including the document's name.
All right. As to 414, it is a marked exhibit, and it cannot be unilaterally. How do you say that?
In unison, unilaterally.
All right. Let's take a break. Withdrawn.